So then let's move on to funding. Just let me take a sip of tea for a sec. So let's just move on to funding. And I'm just going to do a quick canter through different types of funding, because there are a lot of different types of funding. And there's grant funding, which is often linked to scientific research. That's not really my area of expertise, but I just wanted to flag it up that there are grant funding programs available out there. So if you are looking at funding, if you're a scientific or a technology or an R&D type business, you can secure grant funding. But my area of expertise is more debt and equity funding. So let's just touch on debt first. And the reason I touch on debt is because it's different from equity funding. So the key thing about debt is that's money that's being put into your business that the lender is expecting to be paid back over a fixed period of time with interest. So if you go out and borrow 100,000 over a 5-year period, you're going to be making those payments. I mean, 100,000 over 5 years is 20,000 a year plus interest costs. You're probably going to be repaying something in the order of 2,000 a month to pay that money back, so that at the end of the loan period, that loan is gone. The lender has got all their money back, has got their interest back, and you carry on with the business. There's been no dilution of your equity, but you've had to generate sufficient cash flow to pay that money back. And you have to do that pretty much from day one. Occasionally you can get a 1-year repayment holiday or something like that, but then it makes the future repayments a little higher. So debt is all about bringing money in now. There's no dilution in equity, and then the money gets paid back over the term of the loan. But that's not just it. There are often other conditions attached to debt funding, and they're called covenants, which is loan speak for promises that you make. And there are both negative covenants and positive covenants. Negative covenants are things you mustn't do. So for instance, you mustn't change the nature of the trade that you're doing. You mustn't declare any dividends without the approval of the lenders. You mustn't dispose of or close down any material portions of the company. And then there are positive covenants, which are things that you must do. So you must submit to the lenders every quarter financial statements. You must submit to the lenders every year audited accounts within a certain time frame. You must comply with certain ratios in the business. And these are all things that you have to do and have to follow. And it's very, very important that you do that so that you don't fall into what's called a breach in the loan, because that can really affect your credit rating and the cost of the debt will go up significantly. So debt funding is great, but you've got to be aware not just of the repayments, but also the other obligations that are on you under those covenants. So that's debt. Now we'll move on to equity. And equity is where people are buying a stake in your limited company. So you own the shares in your company, and new money is going to come in. New shares are going to be issued out to those investors, and they are going to have a percentage stake in the business. And so if someone comes in and invests and puts 40% of, what becomes 40% of the value of the company, then they are entitled to 40% of any dividends that get paid. They are entitled to 40% of the distribution of any capital, or if there's a sale, they're entitled to 40% of the capital that comes in on the deal. Different types of funding. So we'll start with individual funding. So we've touched on bootstrapping already. That's where you, the founder, put your money in, and then basically whatever you can generate in sales, that forms the cash that's available in the business to spend. Let's take it up a level, and the next most common thing is what's called friends and family. So, the bank of mom and dad, as it were. But go around and talk to members of your family, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters. Who do you know? Who amongst your friends? And you might often be able to find 10 or 15 friends who can pull together, maybe 50,000 or 100,000 to help you get your business off the ground and to the next stage. And that's a really important phase. And it's that's the most friendly group of shareholders you're going to have, because yeah, sure, they're investors in your company, but they're also from your community. They're your fans. They're your closest followers. So many founders often raise that kind of money as their first external funding from friends and family, because it's a little bit easier. On the other hand, some people find that really difficult. They find it hard to go out and approach people who are in their close network, their parents, their brothers and sisters, their friends, and ask for money. And a lot of people sort of have this kind of sense of, oh, well, it's almost like asking for charity. It's not. You're not asking for charity. You are offering people a stake in your company. You are offering people the opportunity to buy a share in the business and have that share and be able to benefit from that in the future through the growth that you, the founder, are driving with your team. So it's important that you're comfortable about that. And you know, many people at first, it feels a bit weird, but go ahead and ask. It's okay. You know, the worst thing that'll happen is somebody says no. The next level beyond friends and family is what's called crowdfunding. And that's something that's really taken off in the last 5 to 10 years. Often driven by technology. Also, there's a less burdensome level of regulation on companies because there used to be very strict rules about who you can and cannot approach for funding. But crowdfunding, and there are a number of platforms. There's Kickstarter, there's Crowdcube, there's loads of them. Just Google crowdfunding near me, and you'll find a whole range of sites that offer crowdfunding options. And basically, crowdfunding is a wide community of individuals and some institutional investors who put money into small startup businesses who are doing what's often one of their first, or if they've done friends and family, then their second kind of external raise. And oftentimes, you know, the individual investments might be small. They might be 10 or 100 or 1,000, 10,000, something like that. But by accessing a wide group of people, by accessing the crowd, you know, if you get 10,000 people who put in 100, well, you've raised $1 million right there. And, you know, that's the whole appeal of the crowd and the whole crowdfunding movement. So it's definitely an area that many companies should look into. It's still competitive. It's still a challenge. There's no guarantee that you're going to get it. But if you get through the processes, and the crowdfunding companies have a number of very interesting vetting stages and processes that you have to get through before you get access to their crowd. But if you can get through that, it's often a very useful way of raising money. Now we're going to move on to what's often referred to as more professional money. But we're going to stick with individuals first, and those individuals are called angels. And many times angels are successful business people who've had their own exit, made their own money. They've decided they don't want to run another company, but they want to take their money and invest in other businesses to support them, to guide them so that they can benefit, those businesses can benefit from the angel investor's own experience, and you know, really kind of keep that whole ecosystem of entrepreneurial businesses going. And angel investors often operate in what's called a syndicate. So there might be a group of 10, 15, 20 of them. In order to get into that, you need to find who's the gatekeeper, because there's always a gatekeeper in one of those syndicates. Who's the gatekeeper, and how do you get to that person to get through so that you can actually pitch to make the investment? So this is where you need to start doing your research a little bit more, finding out who these people are, getting introductions to them, meeting them, you know, go to networking events, go to angel investing events. If you're interested in angel investing, there's different angel organizations all around the world. Again, just wherever you are, just Google angel investor networks, and you'll find a range of things that you can do to get more information or go to events or meet these kinds of people. And then finally, we're going to move into what's called institutional money. And the big change here, there's a couple of changes here. Number one, the amounts of money that we're talking about all of a sudden are really shooting up. And number two, and this is one of the keys, is institutional money is managed by professional investors. So these are people, all they do, their whole job is managing money and raising and investing that money. And what you got to look at with institutional investors is it's not their own money that they're investing. It's money that's come in from people that they've secured funding from, right? And they're often referred to as limited partners. Now, the people that you'll meet in the venture capital funds oftentimes will put some of their own money into a deal as well, or put some of their own money into a pool that gets allocated to the various deals. But this is other people's money that they are managing. Venture capital and private equity, absolutely, it's other people's money. And then the third sector of institutional money is family offices. That might, in some cases, be the family's own money if the family is running its own office. But many times, wealthy families entrust their money to family office companies. So again, the people who are running the money on a day-to-day basis are not the people whose money it is. It's institutional money. So the level goes up, it gets a little bit harder. Reaching these people is tricky. Getting in front of them is tricky. They're going to be much tougher when you're pitching to them. They're going to be much tougher on their negotiations. But they're the different kinds of people you can approach. So just to recap that, because this has been a long section. So initially we had debt funding, which is where you borrow money and you pay it back. And then we moved on to equity, which is where people buy a stake in your company. There is no expectation that they will get that money back from you, the company. They will get that money back when the company has what's referred to as a liquidity event, where there's a sale or someone comes in and makes a new strategic investment or whatever, but there is no requirement on the company to pay that money back when it's equity. And we talked about bootstrapping, friends and family, crowdfunding, angel investors, venture capital, private equity, and family offices. There's a lot to cover. It's all explained in much more detail in my book, so please do have a look at that.